So Theo, I know you're a big comic book guy, man.
Yeah.
Is the dream come true or what?
It's a whole different, world because, when I grew up, I used to draw comics as well. I was going to go to, Disney Animation or Parsons, and I would sit home all day, in New York City and just draw and create things and, grab these action figures and try to, create scenarios. And then, as you get older, you get a little away from it all. And then when that renaissance kind of happened and everything came back with comic book films and now slowly, and, then it came into television, it started to really bring these things up where you're like this kid and you're like remembering these amazing times you had. So for me, it's like, I still read, some of the greatest graphic novels, obviously, that this man wrote and a lot of stuff. And now having a new son on my own, I'm so glad that it's all come back because I just think it's such a comforting, beautiful world for people to be in and to have comics around. So for me, it's a dream come true, and it's also as an actor on that standpoint. I mean, look at this cast, look at the show, look at the way it's done, look at the people behind it. When I came off my last show and they asked me, they said, do you want to jump into another television show? I said, the only other television show I would ever jump into is something that has a Comic-Con audience behind it. Because I've been here and did a couple of them, and I know the love and the way people are at Comic-Con and how that fan is. I didn't have an interest in being in a show that was like, some procedural that some people watch. It's all right. It's this thing that's on this. So this is, it's a dream come true in a lot of ways.
How would you best describe Shades? Is there more to him on the show than there is in the comics?
Well, we hope so. Look, the responsibility that we have in telling the story of Luke Cage is enormous. We're talking about, for all intents and purposes, the first black superhero from the streets. We're talking about a character who in the early 70s, came out and really spoke to an audience in a way that no one had ever done before. And in many ways woke up a young Cheo Coker who suddenly could relate in a way that had been very different. And being able to take that responsibility on, particularly now, with what's going on in our world, is something that we take very seriously. But when we started talking about what that show was going to be and where we were and who the characters were going to be, the first question that everybody asked us was, what are you going to do about Shades? Because he is so important to Luke's origin, and he's so important to just the way that the world grew out of these two characters. And when Theo walked in, there was a confidence there that we immediately were drawn to. Because if you've got Mike Coulter playing Luke Cage, you're going to have a larger-than-life presence. You're going to have somebody who just brings with him that superhero quality, not just as a superhero, but as a person and as a personality. And so what was great about Theo's audition and the body of his work, and to give credit where credit's due, our casting directors, Lorraine Mayfield and Julie Schubert, what they told us was, when you see Theo with Mike, what you're going to be able to do is see two people that are standing on equal footing. And that's really important.
I asked for apple boxes.
As the guy sort of overseeing all this, is there much thought of Defenders as the shows are developing, or do you put that completely out of your mind, or are the tracks being laid in some ways to bring all of this to the Defenders?
Well, first of all, it isn't just my responsibility. It's the responsibility of a lot of very talented people like Alan Fine and Dan Buckley and Joe Quesada in New York, and then our own team, which just starts with Jim Corey, who's our head of production, and Kareem Zarek, who looks after the day-to-days on the shows. But the short answer is everything is done with purpose. We are telling a very large canvas story that in many ways will culminate in the Defenders, but in many ways have to exist in their own world. And so we're expecting that people who are watching Marvel's Luke Cage have maybe seen Jessica Jones, but we can't bet on that. We have to be able to, and have met Mike and have met Luke Cage. We have to be able to tell a story which feels like it's of its own world. And so Mike said something really interesting earlier today, which is what you saw in Jessica Jones is Luke Cage from her POV. This show is you're now going to see Luke Cage from Luke Cage's point of view, which is why we moved the show up to home, which is why the show has such a diverse cast, which is why the show speaks about different things than Jessica Jones spoke to. So that when we do get to Defenders, it's going to feel different. But make no mistake about it, there is an engine that is driving towards that story. So that if you've been with us and you've watched so far the first 4 shows that we've put on with counting Marvel's Luke Cage, then the next up will be Iron Fist. That after that, you've now met all of them. So the next question is well, what happens when they meet all of them? And so that's the part that's interesting to us. It's not who's the big bad or how are their powers going to work or what's the action sequence that we're going to try to figure out. These are 4 people who have very different ways of looking at their lives. Now let's put them together and see what happens. And that's sort of the next adventure that's out there. We'll get there.
To expand on that then, when you set those shows up, did you always think initially that it would be 1 season each and you'd get to the Defenders, or did you think that you would need some room to breathe, maybe a second season here or there?
Oh no, I've been very clear about this. I went to Netflix and told them that we were doing a season of each show that would culminate in the Defenders. And they did something that was unprecedented in the history of television, and they bought 60 hours of television, 5 different series. And we walked out and went, okay, now we got to make something. But the only thing that surprised us even more than that was that after Daredevil appeared, we got a phone call that said, so we want to do a second season of Daredevil. And I said, fantastic, see you in 2017. And they were like, no, we want it now. And we were like, no, we're telling one story that's going to go here. And they went, well, but now you're going to tell more story. And so, look, knock wood, I'm now hoping that everybody gets to tell their own stories, but very much like the Marvel movies, you can follow Captain America's story without ever seeing any of the Avengers films. It's just, they're much richer because, look, let's be honest, if you're going to have 2.5 hours in order to tell a story and you've got 14 characters, not everybody's going to get to have their own story. What Netflix has afforded us is a chance to be able to tell individual stories about each of these characters, each with their own casts, and then at the point where we do finally get them together, hopefully you've come along for the ride, or hopefully you're going to enjoy that particular event.
Jeph, one of the things that's really fascinating about Marvel's Luke Cage is it really leans into talking about race. It does not shy away from it at all, and that's very admirable and brave. And one way that manifests itself is it's the introduction of the N-word to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Was there ever any hand-wringing about whether you guys should do that or not?
No, I mean the short answer is that it's while it is unapologetic about the things that we are talking about, it is not what the show is about. The show is about a man who is looking for redemption. The show is about the making of a hero. The fact that that man happens to be black and is in a black community is the story of Luke Cage. We could not change that story. It would be dishonest to the original creation of where it was. So we recognize that responsibility. We recognize that if you're going to tell the story of the first black superhero from the streets, that you're going to be able to do that in a way that everyone can watch that show and go, wow, that's a side of the story that I've never really thought about, or maybe it does change the way that you think about it. And then just in terms of the language, that's the language of that world. Would I say that that's the language of the world of Jessica Jones, or is that the language of the world of Daredevil? No, it's not. And so in that particular case, it was not something that it was even ever brought up. It was the way that those particular showrunners decided to tell those particular stories. When Cheo came to us and brought us his first script, and we read it and we went, that's the way people talk. I'm not going to be apologetic about it in any way. We are still making a show which is, as we have often said, is PG-16. I mean, we're not making an R-rated show. And so there are certain words that you're not going to get to hear. And if that's what you need in order to do it, then that's what Deadpool is there for. But from our point of view, it's what makes it real, what makes it grounded, what makes you feel like you're compelled to watch the next episode. And if you get that from watching the show, awesome. But I don't think that that's because you sat down and went, because if I sat here and I said, how would you like to watch 13 hours as our particular soapbox on a political issue, you'd go, I think I have something else to do with my 13 hours. But if you learn something along the way, or the way that you look at the world has changed, in the same kind of way Jessica Jones never wore, Melissa Rosenberg never wore on her arm the fact that it was a story that happened to have as part of the elements what had happened to Jess and the way that men treat women and that kind of voice. And so this is the same kind of thing.
Theo, when you got the role, had you already been a fan of Luke Cage, or had you had to go back and read him?
Yeah, I had been, and it was something that I had to circle back to. One of my biggest, things, and we were talking about this before, is that comic books give kids identities. Everybody, it gives you an identity. Whatever that comic book character that you relate to at that moment in your life, and it changed a lot for me throughout. Is I'd love this person, and I'd be into this comic, I'd be reading this one. But the one thing that always was, specific for me was as a kid growing up in New York City. It's like, there's certain comic book characters that you are drawn to, especially when you grow up like I did in certain areas, and it was just, it represents the culture, it represents it. Like he just said, it's like, there are certain things that people say that people go, are you doing that for a reason? No, that's just the way it is. There are certain ways people talk in certain neighborhoods, and there are certain ways that things are. And all we're doing is, and I hate to use a played out statement, but we're keeping it real. Luke Cage is keeping it real on all levels, and that's what the coolest thing about the show is that, from being this kid in New York to stepping on this stage, it's like, I'm in awe of it because it's exactly, there is nothing that feels manufactured at all. And that's what's so beautiful about the story.
Theo, without spoiling the end of the series, can you speak to what drives Shades as a character?
What drives everybody as a person is, to be in a better position than they were yesterday. You know what I'm saying? So with him, I think in this world, it's just him navigating through the world. And how can he be in a better position? And whatever that means, wherever that takes him, whatever that does, however he has to navigate, it's just trying to be, and whatever the consequences or whatever happens.
And we talked a lot about to a certain regard, there's a game of chess that's being played. There's a game of power that's being played. And what Shades is, in many ways, is an opportunist. Is someone who's looking for what's the next game that I'm playing? Who's the next player that I'm playing? What's the next level I'm getting to? And how am I getting there? And if that means that I have to change allegiances in order to better myself, maybe that's something that I'm going to do. If I can find a way to make this Luke Cage thing work for me, let's see how that plays. If I have to figure out how to make Luke Cage go away in order to make things work, then that works on that particular day.
He's servicing himself at all times.
Can he also have a little bit of respect for him in a way that maybe some of the other criminals can't?
I hope so. I hope. I mean, there is, like I said, my job is to humanize the character and to make people, no matter what it seems like on the outside, technically have a part that falls in love with him. I try to do that with all the characters that I play, no matter how bad they are. I want people to feel whatever it is they feel. So I hope that happens.